All right, everyone. It is 2 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and get us started. Good afternoon. I am Taylor Post, Swiftland's office manager, and I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Change, Dealing with the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and today's presenter, Linda Bruno. Linda Bruno has been developing and conducting training for libraries and other organizations for more than 15 years. She offers training on topics ranging from leadership skills to returning balance and lots of areas in between. Linda received her MBA from the University of Florida and has years of experience in hands-on management positions. She develops her trainings based on solid research and, more importantly, real-life application. Linda is also certified with DDI and Achieve Global. Please welcome Linda Bruno and enjoy her webinar this afternoon. Linda?
Thanks so much, Taylor, and welcome everybody to today's session. I have a little bit of a disclaimer here this afternoon, and that is that we schedule a lot of these programs quite a ways in advance. And this particular program, I developed the content for a while back so that it doesn't really reflect the changes we are going through as a society right now. And I was looking through my notes earlier today and I thought, but so much of it is still applicable to exactly what we're going through. So some of it will seem kind of odd because of what we're going through right now, but keep in mind that wasn't the intent when it was originally developed. So we're going to talk about change today, obviously, and some things that go along with that, as well as ways to deal with the stress that can come from that. Because let's face it, stress does happen when change happens, even if it's good change. There are scientific studies that show that can still cause stress. So if you have your handouts there, and those were sent to you with the link to join today, and there was a notice sent out on Wednesday and another notice sent this morning with those handouts. So if you would like to use those, they are attached to the link that you use to get into the room today. So talking about change, the first thing I want to acknowledge is that when we hear the word change, we often think about coping, don't we? Whatever that change might be, we have to cope with the change. Like I said, it could be coping with a change that's wonderful, a new promotion, a new job, a new baby, a relationship, whatever it might be, but still there's some coping that needs to happen to that. So I want you to start thinking about the need for change. Hello, Yasmin, I see that. Thank you so much for saying that in the post or in the chat. So I want you to start thinking about the need for change because we need to acknowledge the need, if that makes any sense, so that we can cope a little bit better. So the second item on your handout is think of a company or organization that didn't change and should have. I've listed one there at the bottom. Some of you remember the name Montgomery Ward, and actually they are still around as a catalog, which I did not realize until I researched this. But think of that. Had they existed still, it would be almost 150 years, and yet they didn't change enough to stay up to date with everything else that was happening. So just type into the chat box an organization or a company that didn't change and should have. No right or wrong answers here. Just want you to start thinking about that. Blockbuster, Sears. Yeah, and along with Sears, Kmart, right? Trains. Yep, Blockbuster again. Yep, Kmart. Absolutely. Neiman Marcus. Ian, are they not around anymore? I heard somebody say once they called it needless markup. Kodak. I'm sorry, Jane. The Adobe seems to be having a wealth of business lately, along with all of the other platforms. So sometimes the platform isn't quite as stable as we would like. Wang Computers, yes. Okay, Ian, I did not know Neiman Marcus was bankrupt. Thank you for that information. Walmart. Now, I would say that they've kind of kept up, maybe haven't been on the cutting edge, but they are still around and still doing billions of dollars of business. So Lord and Taylor, Nordstrom, JC Crew or J Crew, Macy's, Borders, Kmart, some libraries. Yes, Steph, absolutely. J Crew, CVS, Elder Beverly. You see them. There's a bunch of them, aren't there? I put a couple of other ones in there. Somebody said Kodak. I put Polaroid in there. Somebody said Kmart. Yep. Montgomery Ward, Plymouth, the automobile. Some of you don't even remember that. But you know what? We could just about wrap this webinar right now by looking in the chat and saying, okay, folks, this is the reason we need to continue to change, right? Because if we don't, as Steph said, some libraries don't change and then they're not around anymore. She didn't say they're not around anymore, but we all know that can happen. So we need to be aware of that, don't we? Some Give me a company or organization that has continually changed, whether they were forced to or whether they were just on the cutting edge of something. Can you think of somebody like that? Netflix, yep. Apple, yep. Target, our library, I like that. Amazon, yeah. Scary how much Amazon is ahead of other places sometimes. Google, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's. Here are some I put up because I think that some of these have struggled. The music industry, absolutely Microsoft, Western Union, all of the above. I put in Buick because a few years ago they were on the verge of collapsing like Plymouth. And they apparently hired some new designers or something because now they're kind of holding their own. Apple had a very shaky period when they got rid of Steve Jobs, if you remember that time period, fired him basically from the company he started, and then were forced to hire him back because they were kind of floundering. And Amazon, we already said they continually change and nobody can even keep up. FedEx has had to change by delivering mail packages and things like that. In the early 80s too, yeah, Steph, all these Barnes and Noble. J.C. Penney is still trying, but I saw just a headline this morning and I didn't take the time to read it, and it said J.C. Penney could still go under, is what the headline said just today in 2020. So that's why it's so important for us to kind of look forward and say, why are we changing? Whether it's good, bad, or ugly, it's going to be out there, isn't it? Telephone companies, absolutely. So type into the chat box just one change you've seen in your library that is different than anything you would have expected maybe when you were first hired or first came into the library field. Automation, outreach and digital format, mobile services, technology, book delivering, RFID, mobile printing, a new ILS system or curbside pickup thanks to the pandemic, privacy on patrons, video checkouts. Look at this, folks. I hope you're taking note of some of that because some of you probably don't have all of those services yet, but they might be coming down the pike, mightn't they? I would also venture to say that some of you, when those changes, as a matter of fact, probably most of us, and I'll throw myself into that pile, when some of those changes came along, we resisted them. I would almost bet that most of us have experienced that kind of a feeling as we were dealing with some of these changes because that's normal and it's okay to feel that way. But the next question becomes looking at all of the changes, and you see them, they're still flowing into the chat. We have a lot of people in the room today, so I'm not going to try to read everything like I typically do because I don't want to bore you with trying to read 74 chats every time, but I appreciate those comments. I love to interact with the chat. Some of you know me well enough to know that, but when there are 70 some people in the room, it's tougher to do. So I'm going to apologize for that. So think about this. The reason you all have changed and so many of the things that you typed into the chat were specifically because you have competition, right? Because you need to stay relevant in your community. What's the point of people paying taxes for a library if it's doing the same thing it did 10 years ago? That's what they're thinking, right? And some people still think that's all you still do. Who are your competitors? Audible, Netflix, Google, Amazon. Seen a lot of technology there, huh? Bookstores, absolutely. Barnes& and Noble still hanging in there, right? I'm not sure how, but they're there. Bing, Kindles, vendors trying to contact patrons directly. Ooh, ouch. Ebooks and e-audios. Patrons not seeing the value. Yeah, years ago they understood the value of a library, and now because there's so much available to them, it's harder for them to see that value, isn't it? That's another reason Another very strong reason libraries have got to stay up to date. Google, YouTube, Netflix, new users from different parts of the world. Absolutely. All of the above. Third-party vendors. I did a lot of the same things you all said. I put other libraries on there. I've had people tell me before that they don't go to their closest library because they don't feel that welcomed. It doesn't feel like a warm place. Now, that's not anything that we talked about with our changes, is it? We didn't talk about people feeling welcome. We just said we can do all of these new things, which is exactly what we need to be doing. But along with all of those new things, we need to make sure people feel welcome, don't we? Because people will go to other libraries, yes, with better services or better customer service in and of itself. People are friendlier. That's what I typically hear is people are friendlier. So it's just good to be aware of that because if we're not, we will let our guard down. And now, in today's world, is not the time to let our guard down, is it? We have to stay current with what people don't even know they want. And that's another struggle because as we're trying to stay current, sometimes we'll say, what do you want from your library? But they don't even know what they want until we start digging and doing research about what the gaps are in our community and things like that. That's when we start to discover not just, oh, let's do a program like they did in Alabama or California or New York or wherever, but what does our community need? Because sometimes they don't even know. And part of the reason they don't know is because they don't know what the library is capable of. So change in that respect is good, isn't it? Even if we don't necessarily love it, it's good for us. It keeps us in work. Yes, staying relevant. Absolutely. And Raleigh said patrons are better informed today of upcoming titles due to the internet. Yes, and they come to the library for free stuff. Yep. So we've kind of discussed this, haven't we? Why we need to continue to change. One thing right now in front of us, we already talked about the competition, and it doesn't seem to be lessening. It seems to be strengthening as far as what's out there competing for our quote customers, if you will. But the other thing too is things like pandemics happening. Many libraries sort of pivoted on a dime over the last couple of months to better serve their patrons with the curbside service and a lot more things being done through technology and all those kinds of things. That's why we need to remain open to change, right, Heather? We need to continue to change. And so, on the other hand, we also know that as we continue to change as human beings, that can cause us some stress. So let's take a look at that. Why is it so difficult to deal with change? One of the things is some of us withdraw and let our feelings stew. And in the library world, as I've done programs with library folks for the last 15 plus years, I give a lot of behavioral tendency assessments. I call them behavioral tendencies because personality to me makes it sound like it's etched in stone, and nobody's behaviors are etched in stone. So I always call them behavioral tendencies. But as I've given that assessment, I have found the overwhelming majority of folks in the library field score highest in what's called the perfect melancholy. And when they score highest in that category, they tend toward, and this is my secondary style, so I can relate to this, they tend toward introversion. They tend toward being a little more sensitive, being a little more likely to withdraw from things that upset them. So you can see why when I say some of us withdraw and let our feelings stew, that's probably more common in the library world than it might be in other types of environments. Another reason is that some of us have changes occurring in other areas of our lives. It could be relationships, it could be where we're living, it could be financial, it could be any health issues. We don't have any energy left to deal with workplace change. And yet, workplace change continues to happen, doesn't it? If we understand why it's difficult for us and we face that, then we're a lot better equipped to deal with the change more effectively. It doesn't mean we're going to always embrace it. It doesn't mean we're always going to be the cheerleader for it, although I hope you do that sometimes. But at least we'll be able to handle it a little bit differently. Some of us have stronger support systems than other people. I had a list of people that were having some health issues that I was praying over actually. And a couple of them struck me as seeming like they were alone. And one of the things I wrote in the margins of this piece of paper was that I hope they had support because we need that going through life, don't we? We're hearing a lot about in the pandemic, people who are alone are really struggling. Even if they like to be alone, sometimes they're still struggling because they don't have any contact right now. So some of us have stronger support systems, and that's helpful to us. We need to acknowledge that change often results in fear. Fear of what? What do you think we are afraid of as a human species when change is happening? Not being relevant, absolutely. Losing our jobs, the unknown, rejection, the unknown, loss, failure, unknown, failing, all of the above, loss and change and unknown. Loss of control, Reva, right there with you. That's my issue. Being able to keep up. Fear of success, Ian. Yes, sir. Fear of success. Because if we succeed in handling the change, we get more change, or we get more work, or we get more whatever. But that fear of success, and it ups the ante, doesn't it? It ups the expectation for us when we succeed in handling change. Not being able to speak up. We're afraid of that when changes are happening. And right now, the one that popped up a lot was fear of the unknown. And right now, that's what we're hearing from health experts, mental health experts, is that one of the reasons we're struggling so much through this crisis is it's the fear of uncertainty. I was watching, yes, changing your work habits. I was watching a high school group talk about not being able to graduate and so forth just a few days ago. And one of the young ladies, she's 18, said, "We seem to be addicted to certainty." And I thought, oh my goodness, doesn't that go along with dealing with change? We're addicted to certainty. Even if the certainty is something that's uncomfortable, it doesn't make us happy, it might even make us sad, but it's certain. And so we're more comfortable with it. Knowing that, we can step back and say, yes, but long term, being comfortable with that certainty isn't serving me well. So that's something to be aware of as well. So I put just the same as you did, the unknown, fear of failure, and I put the dots there for fear of success, not being able to learn, somebody talked about, the unpredictable, absolutely. Change might be wrong. Raleigh said change itself is often not the problem, but chaotic implementation of the change becomes annoying. Yes, and psychologists will tell us, Raleigh, that the change itself, often people look at it and say, that's going to be a good change. But because of how we are made and how our brains work, the transition piece, which is what you're kind of talking about, the implementation of that is where we really get annoyed, angry, resentful, all of the above. And I want to address this, the change, we're afraid the change is wrong. Honestly, sometimes it is. The risk is if we don't make the change, we may not exist. Fear of disrupting the status quo. Yeah, that's our comfort zone, isn't it, Jane? Whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. That's where we're comfortable. So why disrupt that? Well, because as we've established, we need to disrupt that. And fear of loss, whatever that loss might be, it might be loss of control, like some of you mentioned. There might be other losses involved as we're dealing with that. So just in your own mind, and maybe on your handouts if you're using them, jot down the reason change causes fear in you so you know what to look for. You said failures help us learn, so even wrong changes are a growth opportunity. Yes, but it's so hard for the human being to face that, isn't it? Even if the change is wrong, we change our assumptions. Absolutely, Ernestine. So just jot yourself a note so that you know what to look for as we continue to move through. Because guess what? When the pandemic is over, when the next change happens with our library, there's going to be another one coming up. The more we know about ourselves, because that's really what this webinar is about, isn't it? It's not about change per se. It's about me or you and how we deal with it and what we need to be on the lookout for. Because if we're not paying attention, we go through 3 months of a change and we're miserable. And there's really no need for that. Loss of relevance, absolutely. Jane said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Adventures are crazy. Yeah, exactly. People making changes at the library are crazy, right? I remember somebody telling me I was in a meeting up at the state library several years ago, and one of the staff people there walked in while somebody was on a break during the meeting, and so she and I were talking, and she said she was at a meeting once in a very rural area, talking to I think it was like a city council or maybe a county commissioners group or something, and one of the fellows leaned back in a chair and he said, do we even need a library? And he called it a library. He said, do we even need a library? We got a 7-Eleven. And so he didn't even realize that libraries were pertinent to the community. And that was the person, one of the people with the purse strings. So yeah, that's all part of it, isn't it? Now, I can't find a current statistic. I spent probably 20 or 30 minutes on this one day looking to see, but I wasn't quite sure how to word it. One of you will probably figure this out after the webinar. But the article that I originally read, which was a couple years ago, said half of what is known today was not known just 10 years ago. That's so outdated now. I left it in there because I thought we need to recognize how ridiculous that even sounds now. That's how fast our world is changing, isn't it? I would venture to say half of what is known today wasn't known 3 years ago. I'm guessing. I can't find the statistic. I'd love to have it just because it's one of those curious things. But think about that. In years past, before we had technology and worldwide reach with knowledge, that statistic might have been half of what is known today was not known 50 years ago. 7-Eleven, how does that compare to a library? Gary, in his mind, they had magazines and paperback books, and that was all the community needed. Do you see how narrow-minded that is? And how narrow-minded we can also get when changes are coming along in our library? Yes, bless his heart, exactly. So we need to understand that when we've got that knowledge change going on so rapidly now, with that does come change, right? That's just the way it is. It's the way it will continue. And if we look at it as a positive, then we can be more likely to embrace it, even if we have a little bit of angst about many of the issues that we've already talked about. That's okay. We can recognize that. So when you're thinking about change, it can be negatives and positives for the exact same change. Think about email, texting, social media. Type into the chat box one positive and one negative of those methods of communication that we now have available to us that we didn't have 12 or 15 years ago. Yes, information. Yeah, exactly, Jane. Faster to communicate. Absolutely. That's a positive. Sometimes, right, Steph? And sometimes it can turn around being faster to communicate as a negative because people respond so quickly, or I should say, react so quickly that they don't think first. So even though it often is a positive, doing it quicker, it also can be a negative, can't it? More connected. Yeah, exactly, Kestrel. More connected, negative, more connected. Exactly. It can be the same coin with two different sides. So the time we spend can be a negative. Misunderstandings, easy connection, mass spread of wrong information, get overwhelmed by being constantly connected or contacted, negative tone of voice or the tone in the message may be mistaken. You see all those comments there. It's good for us to acknowledge that, isn't it? I want you to just stop in your shoes right at this moment and think to yourself, there will be a change coming at my library. I don't know what that change will be. I don't know when that will happen, but I need to acknowledge that there will be a positive to that change and there will be a negative to that change. And even if the change ends up not being instituted because it was so negative, then we learned something and there was still a positive. And said body language is 90% of communication, all gone with email, text, etc. Yeah, face-to-face body language is a huge percentage of that. Tone of voice also is a huge percentage of communication. So that too is gone with email and text and actually ends up sounding more negative a lot of times. Yeah, we want to keep in touch, but there's a lot of addiction, not just to social media, but also to texting and our phones and all those kinds of things. So just know that when the next change comes at your library, take a minute. When the announcement is made, if you're not making that announcement, when the announcement is made, just take a minute and think to yourself, I can see the good of this. And if a negative pops up for you, I can acknowledge that there might be a negative to it, but I'm going to focus on the good part of that. Like I said, I see change as a challenge that helps me embrace what will come next. Exactly. You learn, you grow, you become a broader person, don't you? Yes, Lorelei, absolutely. Things could be misinterpreted. So I put down the instant communication, as you all said, and fewer social skills. I saw a study a couple of years ago that said younger people who are digital natives and don't know about not using texting and so forth are actually having trouble looking at people and talking to them face to face because it's so unusual to them. Just like when those of us who were around before texting, when that first started, some of us resisted that, right? So we know that the positives and negatives are there. We need to also be aware that change can also cause a feeling of grief. Wow. I can understand that, can't you? Think about this. If the change involves loss of jobs or reorganization, which is happening a lot right now, maybe not so much in the library world, but in a lot of other worlds right now, we keep hearing about it every day, then the survivors that are going to be there are going to feel like they're the victims. They're going to lose friends, they're going to gain more work, and they're going to gain more responsibility. That's what's coming for a lot of these places where they've laid people off and those people have gone and gotten different jobs and now everybody's shorthanded and those kinds of things in a few months. I hope that's how that turns out, that people are hiring people back and so forth. It's grief. And because it can be similar to grief, we can go through the same 5 stages or something very close to it. The first one is denial. We saw that with the pandemic. Some people are still in denial. We don't really know all the facts about that. And remember that uncertainty and the unknown we talked about? I saw an article just yesterday that something that had been assumed, which I know we should not do, but had been assumed by health experts for the last 3 months or maybe 4 is now not real clear anymore. So there's that denial that can happen. Natalia said looking at people is important, especially if you're sending some links with new information about COVID-19. They might not want even to hear about it. Yes, denial is right. Yes, exactly. Denial. Yeah, absolutely, Natalia. Resistance. So think about a change in your library. The first thing when you hear the announcement, you go, oh, surely not. Surely we won't do that. Surely we're not going to try to offer that. And then you start to resist it and it happens and it's expected, but you try to back off of it so that you can resist it. The next stage is resignation. Well, whatever. That's a word that's often used in that stage. Not when we're dealing with grief as much, but when we're dealing with the grief of change. The whatever attitude can come in. Then we accept it. Fine, if this is what I need to do. This happened for me in this kind of this flow, if you will, many years ago when I started doing webinars. I had a client that was one of the pilgrims in doing webinars, and she was working with a group and she said, Linda, we want you to do a webinar on this. And she was 1,000 miles away. She said, we don't have the budget anymore to pay travel and all that stuff. And if you don't get on the webinar train, you're going to lose a lot of business. And I kicked and screamed and wore out 3 or 4 pair of shoes, just dragging my feet because I was in denial. I like the face to face, and I resisted it for a couple months with her. And then I was resigned to the fact that, okay, for her, I liked her. I wanted to continue to work with her. I'm resigned. I've got to do webinars. And then I accepted the fact that, well, maybe other people are going to do webinars now. And now I'm committed to it, obviously. Here I am. Yes, Jane, if it happens, it happens. Yes, exactly. So think about that, but think about it in terms of we know that COVID is out there. We know that that virus is around and we've had a pandemic and we know that things are going to continue to change through that process. But other things in your library are also going to continue to change. And think about these stages as you deal with those changes as well, because they can sneak up on you, can't they? And you don't know why you're tired and why you don't feel enthused for your job anymore. Take a look. Are you in one of these stages? And typically, once you get to acceptance, you don't often go backwards. Sometimes you do if something happens that triggers you or you're really not feeling well or something like that. But those first three, you can bounce back and forth pretty easily. So know that. Exactly. And I can be in all these stages at one time about many things. Yes, you can. Thank you, Yasmin. I appreciate that. But take a step back, and when you're in those stages, yes, exactly. It helps us understand ourselves, right, Jane? And other people better. Because if I walk into a workplace today and there are 11 coworkers there, we could be in all five stages, couldn't we? And we could be very solidly in just one stage, each one of us. So there might be four people in the resistance stage. There might be two people totally committed to it already, or whatever. Think about that, how that affects the dynamic of your workplace, because you're not the only one dealing with the change. And I think sometimes we get inside our own heads like we do with everything else in our lives, which is very natural. But when we do that, we forget other people are going through the same feelings, aren't they? The same stages, the same frustrations, the same fears. So, one of the things we need to think about is the reason for resistance. And we referred to this a little bit earlier, but we resist a lot of times not because we're trying to be difficult, not because we're trying to cause issues or anything like that. We do so for things that seem very reasonable to us. The first one is we talked about we feel a loss of control. My primary behavioral tendency is called a powerful choleric. And the powerful choleric's big fear in life is loss of control. So you can imagine when somebody forces a change on Linda Bruno that I can resist that a bit. Webinars. Now I love them. I'm happy to be able to do them. But I felt a loss of control because I felt like I had found what I wanted to do when I grew up was to help other people grow and develop. And the only way I could do that in my head was to see them face to face so that I could explain things and help them understand and all of that. So I felt that loss of control. Raleigh said if change creates an imbalance in staff workloads, then resistance is multiplied. Absolutely. Or I will add the word perceived, Raleigh, because sometimes it's a perceived imbalance, isn't it? Not always. Sometimes it's a definite imbalance because of the way things have happened. Only certain people know how to do only certain things or are qualified or whatever. There's a definite imbalance, and sometimes it's just perceived. Yes, exactly, Nicole, if you don't have buy-in beforehand, which we don't always, and sometimes the changes happen so quick, we don't even have time to think about buy-in, do we? Another reason we resist is that we're drowning in change, as I mentioned earlier. This can't take anymore. It's too much change. We've all related to that. Jane, I'm not sure if that was meant for me. I hope so, that you're a new fan of mine. I'm not sure why, but it's a lot to deal with. Thank you, Jane. I'm drowning in change just like you are. I'm working on a new project right now that is really testing my limits, not because I can't grasp it intellectually, but because there's so many moving pieces, it's driving me crazy. And yet I know looking long term, which is what my saving grace is here. So I want you to hear this because it'll help you too. Looking long term, this is going to be really beneficial for the people that I do this for. And it's going to be beneficial for me as well once I get the moving pieces to stay in one place long enough to do it. So yeah, I totally relate to that. And there again comes in my control issue because some of these things I'm going to have to give control over to an outside vendor, and that just drives me crazy because I want to be in control. So just being honest with all of you. This is not, oh, Linda's going to do a webinar because Linda has it totally under control how to deal with change. No, I struggle with it just like all of you do. Monica said, when I worked for Publix, I always had something changing every day. It became very exhausting trying to keep up with it. Yes. My husband used to work for Xerox Corporation, Monica, years ago when they sold copiers. And they would put out new price lists every week for everything they covered, and they would have to memorize them. So I totally get what you're saying there. It was, how do you keep up with that kind of thing? But you all feel that in your libraries too, don't you? That kind of a feeling. And sometimes we feel like it's a mistake. And again, the change could be wrong. And if it's a mistake, it's a mistake. We all make them. But when we jump in immediately and call it a mistake without even understanding the reasoning behind it or understanding the benefit to it, then that's our mistake, isn't it? We've seen other change initiatives fail, and we don't want to invest in something else that's going to fail. What do we invest when changes happen in our libraries? We don't have to pay anybody. We're not investing our money, right? What are we investing? Time and energy. Absolutely. The mental energy, the physical energy sometimes, depending on what's going on. Absolutely, the time, the learning, knowledge, time, costs. You're welcome, Natalia. I hope that does turn less stressful for you. That's exactly why we're here today. Heather said when the mistake isn't acknowledged, it can make it difficult if there's no discussion involved. Yes. And then it's on us, isn't it, Heather? Because in everything that happens in life, whether we're talking about change or anything else, we have choices. And when the mistake isn't acknowledged, there's no discussion, everybody knows it's a mistake, we seem to let it go instead of letting it live inside our heads and causing us grief. Yep, some people think it's not my problem. Distraction for other tasks that were not changed. Yeah, all of the above. We want to avoid damage to our self-worth, and this is something we won't always acknowledge. And I think it's really important because sometimes we feel like the change is going to reduce our power. That's a big one for me. I told you I want to be in control. If this change is going to reduce my power, I've got a head issue to deal with, don't I? Inside my own head and my own choices. Or we think the change is going to make us feel inadequate. And by golly, you know what? That project I'm working on right now, I kind of feel inadequate. It's moving slower than I've ever had a project move, partly because of the other pieces involved. Oh my goodness, I feel a little inadequate, but I can do this. Exactly, Heather. It does help to talk about it so you can learn from it and then move forward. But sometimes the people that made the decision that went along with the mistake aren't willing to talk about it. So sometimes we have to flesh that out for ourselves, don't we? And another thing is it might damage our self-worth because it makes us appear useless. What comes to mind for me here is the self-checkout machine and how much frustration and fear and anger and resentment when those were first introduced, because there were a lot of people that were sure that the only goal was to eliminate jobs. I can't promise you that that wasn't a goal for some people. I don't know. But I also know that for some and many libraries that I talked to, no jobs were lost, but now people could pay more attention to patrons. But it was there, wasn't it? Made people feel inadequate, useless, reduced their power, all of the above. And yet, years later, they look back and say, we have a lot more time to pay attention to programming and services and individual patrons and all of that. So there's the good and the bad again. Yes, exactly, Carrie. It hasn't changed in the minds of some patrons, and that's okay because we're there to serve them, right? So, what are some of the aspects of your organization that might be affected if you resist change or other people resist change? I agree, Colleen. And some people want to use self checkout because no humans will be there. Quality of service. Absolutely. People sense it, don't they, Angela? When they walk in and y'all are tense because we're trying to make changes and people are upset, they sense that the quality goes down. Not everyone receives info about the big picture reason for the change. Exactly, Raleigh. They won't use you. Yep. You'll lose statistics. Reaching out to patrons where they are. Morale. Want somebody to talk to the students. Patrons will not get the sensational services. We may be their only contact and they like to talk to us. Absolutely. Patrons, but sometimes they're resistant to change as well. Yep. All of the above. There are a whole bunch of things that are affected, aren't there? And that's another thing we need to think about. It's not just about us. There are other things that are affected. I put down our patrons are affected, just like you all said, our service, our coworkers. If I'm the one resisting, guess what? I will try to convince other people to resist. Oh, don't you just hate that we do that as human beings? But we do. We want everybody to be on, quote, our side. It will affect our supervisors because they're just trying to do what they're supposed to do. And if we're fighting that all along the way, that doubles their burden, doesn't it? So then add all of that together and our productivity is affected. And I have absenteeism on here because guess what? If I get up to tomorrow morning and all of my coworkers are grumbling and complaining about the changes that are going on and I've got a headache, I will call in and say, Deb, I don't feel like I can come in today. I just don't feel good. And then when I hang up, I'm going to prop my feet up. I'm going to eat some bonbons and watch reruns of The Masked Singer. Now, on the other hand, if we know we're going through a change, everybody's pitching in, everybody's really trying to deal with this the best they can. I'm going to wake up tomorrow with the same headache, but I'm going to get up and go to work. I'm going to take a couple aspirin and go in because we're all on this team together. Natalia said with Curbside, I see them so happy till now. Almost everyone is saying hello to us like to an old friend. Yes, exactly. They needed that contact, didn't they? And of course, if we're resisting change, our public relations are also going to be affected out in the community, which we don't always recognize. We think it's a one-on-one thing. But actually, it's out in the community. People are going, I don't think I want to go to the library anymore because it seems like everybody's so upset there all the time. And we don't need that. We have enough human beings that are frustrated at any one time. We don't need to add to that, right? So think about this. Number 7, and we're on page 3 now. Recognizing, understanding, and managing our emotions when change happens can be critical, not important, critical to whether we can cope with or embrace change. And obviously, the one we want to do is embrace it. Coping with leaves a negative taste in our mouth, doesn't it? I just have to get through this. I love that saying in the bottom corner of the slide. Sometimes you have to let go of what's gone, appreciate what remains, and look forward to what comes next. Doesn't that explain change? Let go of what's gone, appreciate what remains, and look forward to what comes next. Noelia said the Emotional Intelligence Quick Book you suggested yesterday is really helpful. I love that book. I really need to read it again. Yes, I do. I mention emotional intelligence a lot. And the reason I do is how can we do anything in life, which is pretty much what my webinars are about? How can we do anything in life without our emotions being involved? We can't. And so I talk about that a lot because some of you have heard me say in the past, truly, and I'm not exaggerating this, when I studied this 15 years ago, it changed my life, emotional intelligence, because it did teach me how to deal with change better. It taught me how to deal with conflict and grief and disappointment and all those kinds of things, because that's all on me. Nobody makes me mad. I get mad because of something they said or did, but they did not cause me to be mad. They may be a jerk, but they didn't cause me to be mad. So, yes, emotional intelligence is very important. Yeah, Jane, part of change is deciding what will remain the same, and that could change from day to day. I hate to say it that way, but that's exactly what happens, isn't it? We decide what's going to remain the same, but 3 weeks, we've noticed that in the last 3 months. 3 weeks later, it's as if what happened 3 weeks ago never even crossed our path because things are so different. So just keep that in mind. We want to be self-aware and we want to be self-managing of our emotions. And we don't want to suppress our emotions. Every emotion you have about change is perfectly okay, isn't it? And the reason it's perfectly okay is because it's your emotions. You're entitled to your emotions. Feel them, understand them, and then decide what you're going to do to manage them. And that is particularly important when you're in the midst of change, whether you're going to cope with it, which tends to be more of a negative response, or whether you're going to embrace it and say, you know what, I'm just going to try as hard as I can to make this work. at my library. And if it doesn't, we'll figure it out. But in the meantime, I'm going to try as hard as I can. Number 9 says, what are some reasons you might want to embrace change rather than cope with it? You. Yes, people do like to kvetch, don't they? Or however that's pronounced, gripe, grumble, all of that. Natalia said, sure, the emotions seem to be taken aside, but they will return as life improves. Yes, I did live in Cuba through 10 years of hunger and stress, and then I was reborn here again, as well as my family. Yes, exactly. Things change all the time. They'll continue to change. Sometimes they'll be good changes. Sometimes they won't be good changes. But you personally, think about this. What's just one reason you want to make sure you try to embrace change? Try to embrace change. You won't be perfect at it every time. It gives you ownership. Exactly, Lorelei. And if you're like me and you do want that control, me deciding how I'm going to handle the change makes me feel like I'm more in control. Gives you ownership, displays a positive attitude, change is good. Exhausting to keep on fighting it. Absolutely. Kind of run out of energy, don't we? And for what? If it's truly a change that somebody else has instituted or it's going to happen whether we care or not, then we're just beating ourselves up and making ourselves exhausting. Might be for our own good, peace in the workplace and at home. If we like the change, yeah, we're certainly going to want to embrace it. Make you successful, help you reach your goals, less stress, positive attitude irks the grumblers. Growth, learn something new, help release stress, growth, rarely reverse back to the way it was before, especially with technology. And Raleigh, I'm just going to say this, I have more technology than I ever dreamed I would have technology around me. But there are certain things that I have found in technology that people have tried to force on me that are not effective for me because of the way I work. And so I think sometimes too, we have to step back and say, you know what? I'm so glad that works for you. I'll give you an example, a paper calendar. I still use a paper calendar because I'm so visual. No electronic calendar I've ever tried has made me feel like I have a grip on what I'm doing like my paper calendar does. Good. There's some other people that do that. I'm glad it's not just me, but I've had people actually try to humiliate me into using technology for my calendar. And, I'm happy to say I'm strong enough at this point in my life to say, you know what, that just doesn't work for me. I'm happy it works for you, but it doesn't work for me. So sometimes the new best thing isn't always the new best thing, right? Excited to see what comes next. Being on board doing this, of doing the same thing always, yes. Growth in the new age, all of the good stuff that you put there. I am so happy to see those paper calendars pop up. Paper at home, digital at work. You know what? And it doesn't matter, does it, Stacy? If you use digital in 16 different places, if it works for you, that's exactly what you should use. And that's what we need to understand too, is that sometimes we get so used to change coming at us that we think that we have to do every change that's in front of us. My challenge to you today is to step back and say, yes, at work, you need to do what's asked of you, and you need to do it well, and you need to do it in a positive manner, and you need to give it your best shot. And if somebody else decides it's not working, then we're going to do something else. But in your personal life, because let's face it, almost everything I talk about also applies to your personal life. I want you to think about the changes that come at you. And I want you to understand when you have a choice and whether that choice is going to be good for you. So keep that in mind as well. You see there, your attitude determines your future. It doesn't just determine your future, it determines today, doesn't it? That's one of the big reasons we need to be careful about what we're doing with change. Because I read something or heard something the other day, and this person said, you might be able to do what you think you can't do, but you'll never be able to do what you say you can't do. Did you hear that? You might be able to do what you think you can't do, but you'll never be able to do what you say you can't do. In other words, the minute you say it, you've convinced yourself, haven't you? So Some of you have heard this before, and if you were in yesterday's session, you heard about ants already. But thinking about change, there's no way I can't include this. And of course, these were scheduled at 2 different times and all of that kind of stuff. But even so, does anybody remember from yesterday what the word ants stands for? I know a few of you were in yesterday's group. I recognize some names there. Automatic negative thoughts. Absolutely. I just remember ants in my head. Yes. And those ants are automatic negative thoughts. And if there's any area that ants happen, it's with change, isn't it? Ants happen a lot in life, period. Maybe it's about a certain person or a certain event or situation or whatever, but they happen a lot with change. And it's an instinct. It's one of those things where somebody says, I think we should do it this way. And before they even get the words out of their mouth, we don't even know for sure what they're saying. We start to have automatic negative thoughts, don't we? It might be about the person saying it. It might be, the thought might be, and no, I have not been following you around, but the thought might be, here we go again. I've had that thought. You probably have too. Yes, absolutely, Monica. And that would be natural to have automatic negative thoughts. But here's the key. What do we do with them? Whether it's bad health news, financial issues, relational, work, whatever it might be, we have to choose what we do with them because nobody has ever said, you know, I got over my major health problem by being negative. I don't remember ever hearing that. Now, I'm not saying you're cured by being positive, but I'm saying the journey is easier to take, isn't it? I'm also not saying it's easy. Many of you know my husband suffered for almost 11 years with first oral cancer, tongue cancer, and then all of the stuff that happened because of the 62 radiation treatments, down to being his jaw being reconstructed with bone and tissue and arteries from his leg, and that not working, and feeding tube for 2.5 years and all of that. It was a struggle. And being positive didn't cure him. I surely wish it would have. He got cured of cancer, but the radiation effects are what got him. So there were lots of times, but you know what? As I was going through that process, I would have to tell myself, I can't think that way. It's not serving me well. Yes, we do, Jane. We lean toward the negative. We absolutely do. And that's a proven scientific fact that we have a negative bias because that served us well when we were living in caves. I need to be on the lookout and figuring there's a bear or a lion or a tiger after me every day, or I'm not going to survive. So we do have that bias, but it's not a gene in our systems, okay? We have the bias. Let's recognize it. Let's say, you know what? And some people tend toward negativity more than others, depending on their behavior, tendencies, and all that kind of thing. That doesn't mean it's etched in stone. It means we recognize it and we face it and we say, okay, here I go again. I'm having these negative thoughts. What am I going to do with them? So, yes, the automatic negative thoughts come, but you must, I love that, Anne, you must fight to stay out of the negative vortex. And that's exactly what it is, isn't it? Because when you start down the negative trail about the change in your library, you not only start down a trail that's never ending, you bring other people with you. That may be comforting in the moment, but as y'all know, one of my life mottos is this isn't serving me well. And think about that the next time you have those automatic negative thoughts because they will come. Going to a webinar, hearing about automatic negative thoughts, recognizing you have them doesn't stop them. It just means you might recognize them the next time. And then you make the choice to say, nope, that's not going to serve me well. And I do say that, you know that. Those of you who know me and have been in my other webinars, I say it out loud to myself sometimes because I have some negative thoughts, folks. I had negative thoughts about this project I started working on, still do, still will. And then I have to step back and say, yes, but long term, this is why I'm doing this. This is how this is going to benefit people. So understand it will be there. Put a timeline on the negative. Yes, 1 minute only, and then put it away. And sometimes for me, Carrie, it's a half an hour. I call that recovery time, depending on how big the negative thought is and what it's carrying with it. Absolutely. Acknowledge it. Say, this is how I feel. Sit and cry or be frustrated or journal or whatever you want to do, and then let it go and say, here's how I'm going to handle this. I acknowledge it. I'm not denying it. This is how I feel. This is how I'm going to respond. Go for a run. Yeah, do whatever you have to do. I'm not a good runner, but I can go out and get some sunshine and some fresh air, right, Steph? Natalia said there are times that everything comes together. In 2017, besides the hurricane, 2 cancers visited 2 young ladies in my family, one after another. How could one? You can't be instantly optimistic, can you? Became active and then we stay hopeful. Exactly. It's rare for people to become instantly optimistic about major things. Even if that major change or major thing is a change in your library, it's hard to be instantly optimistic. Maybe we should say we could be cautiously optimistic when it comes to dealing with change in our library. Hard to have optimism when people are dealing with major health issues. Heather said, I lost my sister to cancer, forced myself to remember that at least I had many years with her. It was very hard, but it helped. Me too, Heather. I lost my sister 2 years ago. And somebody said, are you going to fly back to Ohio for the service? And I said, no. And they said, really? And they tried to guilt me. And I said, well, number one, I helped her financially for several years, and I would have rather spent that money helping her than paying for a plane ticket after she was gone. And number two, for the past 3 or 4 years before she had died, I had called her every Saturday and talked to her for an hour to 90 minutes. And that's what I focused on. Me too, Heather. I understand what you're going through. Yes, it was hard to be positive about having to work from home, but I'm hearing from some people, Susan, that now they don't want to go back because they actually have adjusted to that and find themselves more productive to a change that they fought tooth and nail when it first happened. So that's what we're talking about. Thank you for sharing all that. Furry coworkers help a lot with working from home. Mine do not. I have to lock them out, Nicole. I love having them here, but I have to lock them out. So there you go. Think about an experience that you've had that created an ant regarding a recent change in your library. Just think about that to yourself. Your snore, Monica, that's funny. Mine get up on my desk, my cats do, my dog does snore behind me, yes. So think about that ant you've experienced. Here's my theory. Now, I heard about ants in a story that I read, but I decided, being the person that I am, trying to make that a positive thing, that maybe we could make them pets. Ew, right? But we can acknowledge that many, if not most of the changes we experience could be potentially exciting things. That's how we make them a pet. So if you think about something that's happened in your library that was initially instigating an automatic negative thought, how could you turn that around into a potentially exciting thing? Find the silver lining, exactly. A while back, I was working with a group, and it wasn't about change. I can't remember what it was, but it was during some budget cuts a few years ago. And we were talking about how do you make it potentially exciting. And a lady said, oh my gosh, I just had my light bulb moment for today. And I said, what was that? And she said, I just realized that I have complained for 2 years about two projects that I wanted to do around my house that I didn't have time to do. And I now have time to do those. She was so excited. Yes, exactly, Jane. Make them pets, nurture them, acknowledge them. Don't necessarily feed them until you've made them pets. Then you can feed them and make them grow, right? Yes, you have more time to participate in webinars. Taylor and I were talking about that. And I said, I heard somebody say a couple weeks ago, this issue has been really good for continuing education stats because a lot of people are wanting to take webinars and learn and grow and get their mind off of things. Yes, without food at first, absolutely. So you understand what's happening there. You just want to make sure you're looking at things and recognize it and being willing to recognize how you're reacting to a change. That's huge, isn't it? Because we can deny our own reaction. Not only do we deny that somebody's trying to make the change, we will deny that we're being negative about it if we're not honest with ourselves. It's so important. Cod liver oil. I love that. I'll have to add that to my webinar, Jane. I'm gonna give them cod liver oil, and this is what they'll look like when I give them cod liver oil, right? They'll be happy little ants. At first, I thought he was playing a musical instrument, but I think he's carrying a sandbag. So what else can we do to adjust? There are 4 basic steps, and these are basic steps just to have that foundation under us. The first thing that we've talked at length about is to understand the reasons for change. And if you don't know, ask. Now, that doesn't mean people will always answer you honestly, but they're never going to answer you honestly if you don't ask, right? So ask what's going on. Can you help me understand the reasons behind this just so I can be more involved and be more invested in it and help share that information with somebody else? I even said that to somebody a couple years ago. It was something that was going on with a program that I was doing, and something different had changed and somebody was upset about it. So I went to the person that made the change and I said, so if you'll help me understand why we're doing this, then I can share that with other people and turn this around to a positive. And that's what we did. But without knowing the reason, I couldn't do that. I just thought, gosh, why are we doing this? I was as frustrated as the person that was upset. So understand the reasons for change. Accept the need for change. I think we've done that here today. We've been together for an hour now. I think we said pretty clearly right up front, we all acknowledge the need for change in our libraries and in our world, really, even though a lot of the changes can be negative. But in our libraries, we accept that need for change. What is BYO, BYO, BYO? I'm not sure what that is. The next one is perform the change day to day. You know the reason behind it. You've accepted you're going to need to make changes. Just start doing it. That's what I'm doing with this project that I'm working on. I can't do it day to day because, for instance, yesterday I had 2 webinars. There's no time for me to get my head around a project during that day. But I'm doing that in chunks and I keep moving forward, moving forward, moving forward. And now I'm starting to get excited about it. So understand the reasons, accept the need for it, perform it day to day. And here's the big one, choose your attitude regarding that change. I will never tell you, you must be excited about this change. That's silly. There may be some changes that happen that no matter how much you try to choose your attitude, excitement will not be what happens, but acceptance could be, and willingness to participate could be, and willingness to give it the old college try as hard as you can to make it successful could be your attitude, couldn't it? Jane, thank you so much. I don't want you to be afraid of positive change. By the way, you all have my email address at the bottom of the first page of your handouts. If you ever need to flesh something out a little bit more that we're talking about, drop me an email. I can give you my objective opinion. I am not a psychologist. I just have lived a lot. I have researched a lot. I have tried a lot of these different things to see what works for me. And I'm more than happy to give you that information. And then if you like it, you use it. And if you don't, you delete it. I will never know. It's a win-win. So you're always welcome to do that. Yes, acceptance makes it better. Put a little sugar with it. That helps the medicine go down, right, Yasmin? And the sugar is your attitude. I need to do a little slide on that. Adding a little sugar makes the medicine go down, and we need to do a slide on how we can do that with change. Reva said sometimes you just have to do it and find out it's not so bad. Exactly. You're welcome, Beth. And Reva, what happens too is not only do you find out it's not so bad when you're willing to just do it, when you look back, you can't remember ever not doing it that way. Some of you may remember physical card catalogs. Thank you, Joanne. Yes, it will be archived. Taylor is recording it, and that then goes into the Swiftland archive. So yes, it will be. Yeah, it becomes the new normal, and you actually then end up thinking, what was I thinking trying to resist that? I was that way when I was told I had to monitor the Ask a Librarian desk. I was terrified. I love it now because you've grown. You've developed as a person. Change does that for us, doesn't it? Even when we resist it, it does that for us. So we just need to be willing to let it do that for us. You change as a positive, like we've talked about. You may not ever love the change that gets instituted, but you learn, you grow, you even learn what you don't like, and that's still a positive. You learn more about yourself, don't you? Right there's a positive that you can apply to every change. You learn more about yourself. Whether or not the positive ever becomes something that you feel good about, you learn more about yourself. Here's a big key. Don't be a victim. So often, look what they're doing to me. I can't believe they're doing this. All of those kinds of things. Don't be a victim. It's not going to serve you well. Make your own choices. Control what you can control. And this has become another one of my life mottos that I heard a few weeks ago on a podcast. Control the controllables. When things were so out of control with the pandemic and still don't feel in control to me, but I can't control any of that. So I don't dwell on it. And I don't listen to a lot of the news because it changes every 2 days about wear a mask, don't wear a mask, do this, don't do this. So I just don't. I pay attention to the instructions that are given in the guidelines. I wear my mask, I social distance, I do all of that. But I can't control anything else in that whole situation. So I'm going to focus on what I can control. Nicole said, when it's all out of control, I throw myself an emergency dance party. Oh, I like that. Yeah, we all grow, don't we, Jane? An emergency dance party. I think that could be a new webinar, how to have an emergency dance party, Nicole. I like that. Admit that change is rarely entirely negative. As I said, at least you get a chance to learn and grow. It's rarely entirely negative. Yeah, right now it would have to be virtual. You're right. Change challenges you and makes you a stronger person. My mama used to say, and she would say it intentionally with bad grammar, what don't kill you makes you stronger. And not good grammar, and she knew that, but it made a point, didn't it? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So this everything we go through with changes in our workplace make us stronger. Here's a positive for you. When you go through a change at your workplace, you just added something to your resume if you ever need it. And maybe you won't, and that's great. Zoom dance parties could work. I think you're right. They could. Oh, now we gotta figure out the kind of music. Monica said, change reminds me of the Serenity Prayer Guide. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and uncontrollable, right? Courage to change the things I can, which means control the controllables, and wisdom to know the difference. There you go. That's exactly right. Understand that change equals stress, which equals energy. Are you going to allow your stress energy to be positive or negative? It's going to create energy, isn't it? Because whatever change is happening is going to create stress in us because it's different, it's new, we may or may not be ready for it. There's energy going on. Are we going to turn it to the positive or are we going to turn it to the negative? Again, it's a choice, isn't it? And acknowledge also that change is constant, or you might say it's inevitable. Or you might say it's never ending, or you might say all of the above. If you acknowledge that, then you're not as overwhelmed every time something happens that creates change in your life. You just know it's going to, whatever that might be. If there's something within that that you can control it. If it's not controllable, accept it. It's so annoying. You're right. Absolutely. I could add that too. Change is annoying. Yes, I could add that. But again, think about this. I want you to just stop for a second and close your eyes for just a second and think about what your life would be like if there was absolutely no change in it. Exactly, Riva. You and I were thinking on the same wavelength, and I had my eyes closed while I was saying that. It takes the monotony out of life. Life would be boring. Yeah, exactly. Maybe we would be more comfortable, but it would be boring Because if we're going to take all the change out, that means all the good changes, all the fun things, all of the interesting things, all the growth things, all of the wonderful things, we're done because we've refused to take any change into our life. Scary things, yeah, but those can be pets too, can't they? Avoid these ants, automatic negative thoughts, which are also energy drainers, holding grudges. People are going to make mistakes in your life, and holding the grudge just drains your energy. I call them energy vampires. Just sucks the energy right out of you when you hold grudges, doesn't it? Placing blame, same thing. It doesn't matter. I can remember going into a meeting several years ago with a client, and there were several people on the training team. We all walked in, and one of the trainers had forgotten to write down a training date on her calendar, and she missed it with a client. And the person running the project looked around the room and looked very pointedly at her and said, "Well, we all know who made the mistake. How are we going to fix it?" And I thought, you know what? That whole first part of that sentence was unnecessary, wasn't it? Because it sucked the energy right out of the room. It caused everybody to have automatic negative thoughts. So placing blame doesn't really solve a whole lot. I remember a sign that said the only thing permanent in life is change. Absolutely. It also feels good to come out of big change knowing that you got through it, you persevered, you learned something, you grew, all of the above, right, Heather? Monica said, "Can I tell my stepmother to stop holding a grudge against me from something that happened 7 years ago?" No, but here's what you can do, Monica. You can let it go. That's on her, right? That's on her. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't change other people. Here's something I'm going to share with you that my late sister said that I thought was so profound. I told her I was going to use it in my programs, and I have. She used to work in a factory. She was disabled. She worked in a factory all of her life, and when she became disabled, she had to go home. But she used to work with a couple of people that were just mean. They were just downright mean. And one day she was sitting at the lunch table, and they were about 3 feet away from her talking about her, just like I'm talking right now, knowing she could hear every word. And when I called her that Saturday, she told me that, and she was just so frustrated. I said, but that's their issue. What kind of person would do something like that? And so I was trying to talk her through that. The next week when I called her, she said, "Hey, I got it." I said, "What's that?" And she said, "I would hate to live inside their heads." There you go, Heather. Or Monica, I'm sorry. Think about that. You'd hate to live inside a person's head that's holding a grudge for 7 years because it's eating them up, not you. So just don't live inside other people's heads. Yep, divine forgiveness. Just let it go. Gosh, it'd be a shame to live like that, wouldn't it? Feeling guilt is another energy drainer. If you're the one that did something that made people feel bad, sometimes we feel that guilt. Apologize, move on, get on with life because it's an energy drainer. If you're the one that didn't jump on the bandwagon for the change and you resisted and caused a lot of extra work, you might feel guilt over that. Acknowledge it, apologize, move on. Realize that people who look forward enjoy life a whole bunch more than the people that are looking backward. The if onlys. Oh, if only I had done this. If only they would have done this. If only this had happened to me. If only this hadn't happened to me. I just spent those 6 seconds wasted, didn't I? Because I was living backwards. Exactly, Monica. I love that. I thought that was a very profound. My sister was not a stupid person. She didn't have enough self-confidence to try to do better in her life. And not that working in a factory is a bad thing, but she could have done something else if she'd wanted to, because it was kind of a very tough physical job. No air conditioning in the summer and those kinds of things. But she was a pretty deep thinker on some things. And when she said that, I thought, I love that. Kierkegaard said life must be lived forward but understood backward. Yes, it's okay to reflect, isn't it? About the changes that have been made, about the responses that we've had, all those kinds of things, and then move forward. How am I going to use that information to better inform my life moving forward? Don't try to defend the old way. Unless it's one of those pick your battles things, isn't it? Unless the old way is what was really good for your library and you can see the bigger picture and you have some influence and you think it will make a difference, but don't defend the old way just because it was always done that way. Little kitten is cute. Don't be afraid of change. You may lose something good, but you may gain something better. Natalia said, but the grown-ups' experience wisdom apparently doesn't fit in this nowadays world with totally new experiences. We're getting more questions than accumulate answers. We all gather through the centuries as human beings. Yes, the only hope is that there will be changes and the good ones will take place. A new kind of wisdom will prevail. It's going to be out there whether we like it or not, right, Natalia? So we just do what's best for us the best we can while we're dealing with the changes. So thinking about the fact that we talked about emotional intelligence earlier and what that looks like, ask yourself these questions. How do I feel about the changes that are going on around me? And what is my attitude about change? That's for you. Don't need to answer that in the chat box. That's just for you to think through for just a second. Write it down on a note. I find that writing, and scientists even prove this, that writing something helps embed it in your memory. So if you need to write something down in front of you, if you need to journal about it tomorrow, after the webinar today, whenever, understand yourself. How do I feel about the changes going on? What is my attitude? And here's a really big question. Why do I feel that way? Is it from that fear? Some of you who know me and have been at my other webinars know that I have struggled with self-esteem my entire life. And I read an article a couple of years ago because I'm always trying to figure out why haven't I outgrown this, right? I'm far enough along in life I should have. And it said when you grow up through your formative years with low self-esteem and people reinforce it, which is what my family did, that you always have a core of that in you that never goes away completely. Now that I've acknowledged that, when something happens and I do react a certain way that isn't going to serve me well, this is the question I ask myself. Why are you reacting this way? Is it from low self-esteem? Is it from fear? Is it from hurt? Is it from disappointment? You hear that? That's all about me and it's all on me, isn't it, to make those decisions. So ask yourself, why do I feel this way? It might be something we've already talked about today. Your reason why you feel that way might be something totally different. But if you don't know your reason, you're going to have a hard time handling it, aren't you? Carrie, thank you. I don't know if Taylor's still with us. We've got about 15 minutes yet, but the chat is almost full. What can I do differently so that I embrace change rather than trying to cope with it? Give that a minute. And I won't ask you to type into chat because I don't want it to totally disappear, and I'm not sure how long it would be before it did that, but I do want you to answer this for yourself. No right or wrong answers here. You know who you are as a person. What can I do differently so that I can embrace change rather than try to cope with it and have that negative spin to it? So think that to yourself. This is the top of page 5 if you're taking notes, and jot yourself a note. Because y'all know, if you leave here today and nothing changes, nothing changes. In other words, if you don't choose to make a change, then nothing about how you deal with change is going to change. Because there was no magic wand in the webinar today. Gosh, I'm still looking for that. And if I ever find it, I'll develop a whole new webinar and I'll go live in Hawaii because there will be millions of people wanting to join my webinar with this magic wand that I will have. But we have to make the changes, don't we? So think about what you're going to do differently to embrace the change. And then think about too, we've talked about this and that all sounds nice and warm and fuzzy, Linda Bruno, but what happens when we feel we just can't take any more? What happens to you when you feel you just can't take any more change? Anger happens a lot of times. I've had enough. How long is this going to last? Why are they doing this to me? There's that blame thing going on again. Frustration, withdrawal, somebody said, Steph said, exhaustion, depression. There could be another 10 added to that list. Let's look at a few more. Impatience with everybody, basically. Loss of concentration. This is a big one for me. When there are just things swirling all around me, I can't focus. Anxiety, absolutely. Illness, because everything we're talking about here, whether it's withdrawal, anxiety, loss of sleep, impatience, the concentration thing, all of that creates toxins in our body if we deal with it long enough. Migraines, the depression. So that will create physical illness for us. And if you've got your handouts, and I hope you do, because there are a couple of assessments on here that can be really helpful for you individually to work through. The first one talks about how stressed you are. So if you've got your handouts, take a minute, just scan down through there. There are 17 questions. We've got a few minutes left yet. I want you to scan through those 17 questions and answer just gut-wrenchingly honest. And it should not take you more than a minute to do this because you know the answer. Don't try to answer what's right. Try to answer what's real. Take a minute to do that and I'll come back. If you didn't happen to print the handouts, go back to, after the webinar is over, you can go back to the link that Taylor sent you and it has the handouts attached as a PDF. And this assessment can be very helpful to you. There is a scoring system. Yes, you check out. Absolutely not able to help the customers. Yeah, you're just not interested anymore. There's a scoring system on page 5 about how stressed you are. And once you circle the numbers, you'll be able to look at your 17 statements and see which areas you need to work on. And I have a couple that I circled. One of them is I feel tired emotionally, physically, or spiritually. For the last 3 days, and I don't know why, I'm still trying to track it down. I put a 3 on that one because for the last 3 days, I have awakened somewhat tired. All of the above, Deborah said. Yeah, absolutely. And the other one, I'm dealing with stressful external circumstances. Had a lot of death in my life in the last couple of years that's still there. You know, the issues are still there, the grief is still there from time to time. So just understand yourself because that will help you understand some of the underlying reasons that maybe you're not dealing with change as effectively as you might. The stress might be caused by change, the stress might be caused by something else, but they certainly impact each other, don't they? Dealing with change affects your stress level affects how you deal with change. You can't get away from it. Heather said, I know 3 co-workers who are working up at 4 a.m. not getting back to sleep. This includes me. Yes, Heather, I did that 2 nights in a row. I woke up between 1:43 and 1:46 as if I had had 8 hours of sleep, which I had not, and couldn't get back to sleep. Yes, Carrie, grief sneaks back up out of the blue for years. I talked to somebody the other day that lost her husband 25 years ago, and she looked at me and she shook her head and she said, there are still times, and that's all she said. She just let it trail off. And that's not the first time I've heard that. That's the longest time I've heard that, but it didn't surprise me because mine's been 3 years. I have a friend that's been 6. I have another friend that's been 11, and they all tell me the same things. It sneaks back up out of the blue. Yep, trouble sleeping. Hard to stop your brain from circling with negative thoughts. Pain in the neck, literally. Absolutely. Nicole, and those of you who have trouble sleeping, and this might help the sleep thing and it might not, but it might help the brain circling negative thoughts thing, journal it. And if you were there yesterday, I mentioned journaling and somebody said, do you write down your negative thoughts? And I said, that's exactly what I write down. I write down a lot of positive thoughts in my gratitude journal, but in my regular journal that I write 1 page of per day, and it's a smaller journal, it's not 8.5 by 11. It's probably half that size. And I will write, how am I feeling today? And then I go back and look and see how I was feeling the day before and how I was feeling the year before. And it's really good to reflect on that. It's clarified some things for me. And again, just drop me a note if there's any way I can help you with anything like that or with any tools or techniques about journaling or whatever. I'm always happy to address those for you. So page 5 was, most of that was that assessment. And then the next page talks about what are you going to do to recognize the stress from change or whatever you're going through. The first one is to listen to your body. Is it in fatigue? Do you have a pain in your neck? Are you not sleeping? Is it in knots? Do you have a headache all the time? Whatever it is. Because once you do that, then you have to step back and decide, how can I mitigate some of this? How can I lessen it? You notice I didn't say take it away, because when we're dealing with a lot of stress and a lot of change, there are going to be physical ramifications to that, but you need to figure out ways to do something about that. Counting down, Noelia said, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yep. I eat. I do too, Jane. More than I should, and things that I shouldn't eat. They're not horrible, but they're not good for me either. And I'm typically a really healthy eater. My doctor even said last year, "You live so clean." Well, she didn't go to say that this year. It's been a little different. Listen to your body. Exercise. If that means a walk out in the fresh air, do that. Now we're coming into a very hot season, so it might need to be early or late. But some kind of exercise, walk around your room, dance. Let's do our Zoom dance if we need to do that. Yoga, absolutely. Find quiet time. Noelia said, okay, the way you do that. 5 things you see around you, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste. I like that. I've never heard of that, Noelia. Thank you. That's great. And by that time, you kind of let that go, don't you? Find some quiet time. Even if you're not an introvert, I'm an introvert, so my quiet time, I read this t-shirt once and it's so appropriate. It said, my quiet time is for the safety of others. Because if I don't get my quiet time, I become one of those grumblers. So find quiet time, even if you're not an introvert. Everybody needs a little bit of quiet time. Take a leisurely walk. Yep, podcasts help. I was listening to a podcast for months, and when all of this started with the pandemic, the podcast became very negative and very um, discouraging almost. And I quit listening to it about 3 weeks ago. I'll pick it up again when this is all over. But the total just helps you understand, Stacy. If you're looking at, thank you for asking that question. I didn't mention that. I appreciate that. If you're looking, you've got 1 through 17. So if you're looking at a score of 34 or less, you don't really have very many issues. If your total is higher than that, then that's the time to look up and see where you're higher on those categories and which ones you need to focus on. Did that make sense? I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier. Yeah, your quiet time is important. Organize your time, whatever that looks like. With a family, hide in the closet. You know what? I listened to an Oprah show many years ago and I only saw probably 5 minutes of it and they were talking about this. And it might have been Gwyneth Paltrow or I don't know, somebody I would not have expected, maybe Jennifer Aniston. She said, I started with going into the bathroom and closing the door for 1 minute. And if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. Organize your time, especially now, because lack of structure is one of the things that's frustrating people right now. Leave your work at work. These are all listed for you, and there's a line beside each one of them on page 6 if you want to write something down for yourself. But have some outside interests and hobbies, whatever those might be. Develop a relationship with your supervisor. If you're dealing with a lot of change, if you have a good relationship with your supervisor, then you feel more comfortable asking what's behind the change, don't you? Remember, we mentioned that. Asking what's behind the change, understanding what's behind the change. Avoid negative coworkers and friends and family if you can, and make sure you're not the negative coworker that people are trying to avoid. Make sure you've got control over your finances as much as you can. Remember, control the controllables. I'm doing pickup at Walmart now and I'm spending more money because it's so easy to click, click, click. Not a lot more, and I'm getting things that I want. Yesterday they substituted 2 3-pound bags of frozen fruit with tiny little bags of blueberries. I can't tell you how many little bags of blueberries I got, but I'm spending a little more. And I told my neighbor, I said, you know what? I don't want to go into the stores right now. So that's an expense that works for me right now. Acquire new skills. Identify a friend you can talk to. Don't be somebody that grumbles all the time and depresses them, but somebody you can talk to and be honest with about what you're feeling when you're going through a lot of change. Pay attention to your job. What's coming next? When we're through all of this and everybody's back to work and whatever the new normal looks like, it's there. What's next? Yes, Karen, a good professional relationship with supervisor and your coworkers. Absolutely. Look what's not changing. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in, oh my gosh, there's so much change. But you know what? There are things in your life that aren't changing. I still have my 2 cats and my dog, and someday that will change. But right now, we're a family. And those are the kinds of things we need to look for sometimes. Create margins in your life. That's what I'm hearing from a lot of people that are saying surprise them in a good way is that they now have time to play board games with their family. They go outside with their family. They do this and that because now they have margins. They have time to do that. What concerns me is that they'll fall right back into old patterns when life goes back to quote normal. So the question becomes, how are you going to create your margins? What are you going to do with the things that we talked about today? What's something I'm not going to ask you to share in the chat box because I know we're over our limit for chat comments right at the moment. But do be thinking about what you're going to do differently because remember, if nothing changes, nothing changes. You can discover how to sail your own ship if you choose to. Thank you all for being here. It's up to you how far you go. If you came in today dealing with change at a J level and we can move you to S or even M, then you're going to do better dealing with change, aren't you? And remember, if you need me for anything, let me know. I hope you leave the session determined not to just cope with change, but even make it a pet sometimes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Linda, for an informative webinar this afternoon. Attendees, if you enjoyed this webinar, we ask that you join us on May 26th for Linda Bruno's next webinar, 9 Ways to Stay Cool, Calm, and Collected. As always, we encourage you to keep an eye on the Swiftland CE calendar, the Swiftland Facebook page, or your message from the listserv. Thank you everyone for attending and have a great